Hello students, welcome to the lesson Figures of Speech. Today we are going to be learning about all the different figures of speech that are important from the exam point of view. That is right up to the 12th standard. This is a very important topic. So we are going to be learning about figures of speech. What is figures of speech and what are the different kinds of figures of speech? A figure of speech is a departure from the ordinary form of expression or the ordinary course of ideas in order to produce a greater effect. Now, what does this mean? It means that in normal language, whatever speech we use, whatever way we use to talk, this is a little different from that. That means you're creating a special effect in order to draw the attention of the reader. Now, when somebody says, "Wow, it's raining cats and dogs out there." Now, does that really mean it's raining cats and dogs? No one has ever seen like it rain cats and dogs, but what they really mean is that it is pouring, it is raining extremely very heavily. So another example of this kind of figure of speech is when at a board meeting, like Harris, when the say the director or the chairman says, "Harris, when I said any questions, I was using only a figure of speech." That is, he was asking a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question asked just for the sake of asking, just for emphasis. So when the man said any questions, he expected there to be no questions. Now let us learn a little more in detail about figures of speech. What is a figure of speech? A figure of speech is figurative language in the form of a single word, or it can even be a phrase. It can be a special repetition, like you repeat ideas, arrangement of words in a particular order, or omitting words. That means you're not using particular words with literal meaning. Or it can be a phrase with a specialized meaning, not based on the literal meaning of the word. The example that we saw just now, raining cats and dogs. Now, what is it? A figure of speech is essentially a word or a phrase used in the non-literal sense for rhetorical or for a very vivid, a very clear effect. And they are plainly defined as saying one thing in terms of something else. Now, let us look at these examples. What do they really mean? Well, it's rather simple actually. Now, to look at the fine print, literal means taking words in the usual or the most basic sense without metaphor or without any exaggeration or hyperbole. But rhetorical means the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing. Literal means what you speak in the normal, normal course of events, whatever your everyday talking, that is what is meant by the literal meaning. But what do we say in rhetorical, or when you're using figures of speech, you're using words to make the language colorful, to add a certain effect to it, okay, to make it very dramatic. You're not using it in that literal sense. Whenever you say something and you don't mean it, it literally means you're using a figure of speech. Let's say you're about to head out to the store. That means you're going out of the house to the store, and your mother says, "You better take a jacket. It's raining cats and dogs out there." Now, what does she mean? She doesn't mean that you're going to be hurt, that you're going to have a cat or a dog land on your head. It doesn't mean that. She means to say that it's pouring, it's raining very heavily. Now, all the types of figures of speech. Now, the types of figures of speech are based on different categories. There are those that are based on construction, the way the sentence is constructed, that is climax or anticlimax. Climax is you have like words in an ascending order of importance, and anticlimax, like you have a movie, beginning from the very simple, routine and mundane kind of events and then going to a high. And in anticlimax, you have ideas which begin from a height and then become very low. Then there are other figures of speech that are based on resemblance, on they look the same. Like for example, you have comparisons, like you have a simile, you have a metaphor, you have personification, you have apostrophe. All these are based on resemblance, on the look of words, and those based on association, like metonymy, synecdoche. That means one thing is related or connected to another. And there are other ones, that is the fourth kind, that is based on contrast. That means here you're contrasting, like suppose black and white, anything that is different. So an epigram, antithesis, all these are based on contrast. Then now let us go to the first kind, that is simile. In a simile, a comparison is made between two objects of different kinds, but both of them have something in common. That's the reason why you're comparing, right? If there are two different things and they have nothing in common, then you will not talk about them. But here there are two different things having something in common. And the simile is usually, how do you recognize a simile? You will look for the words as or like. So they use as, like, as, or so. Now in this example of the simile, as the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. So here we say the hart, H-A-R-T, means a deer. So here the poet or the writer is saying, just as the deer, pants, that means he is very thirsty in a dry place and there is no water. So just as the deer pants after the water brooks, he goes searching for water. In the same manner, he says that his soul pants after God. That means there are human beings who long to know more about God. The next simile, is, my dog is as smelly as dirty socks. So here you're comparing a dog who is not bathed regularly, a dog who is dirty, with your socks which are smelly. So what do they have in comparison? Both of them are compared. The smell of the socks is just like that of the dog. In the next one, that too is a simile. It is, this pizza is as cold as ice. That means it's not warm. So when the pizza came, instead of it being warm, it is as cold as ice. That is an exaggeration. Now the next one. So the first one was simile. The next one is a metaphor. A metaphor is an implied simile. That means it is understood. It does not, like the simile, say that one thing is like another. It doesn't say one thing is as another. So the words are not used, the obvious words as or like are not used. But it takes it for granted and proceeds as if the two things were one. For example, you don't say the camel is like the ship of the desert. Okay, you're not saying that. You're saying the camel is a ship of the desert. That means you're saying one thing in the other. A camel is not a ship, right? But it does take people. It carries loads. It carries people through the desert. The same way, a ship is a vehicle that is used to carry passengers and goods. The same way, the function is the same. So here, when you don't use the words as or like, and you're saying one thing is another, like suppose you say life is a dream. Now life is not a dream, all of us know that, it's reality, but sometimes life is very short or very dramatic. So in that sense you say life is a dream. Then every simile can be compressed into a metaphor. A simile is longer than a metaphor, so you can compress it and make it shorter, and every metaphor can be expanded into a simile. So instead of saying Akash fought like a lion, okay, when you see the word like, you know that Akash is a boy and a lion is an animal. But what do they have in common? Both of them have the quality of bravery. That means he fought like a lion. He was like a lion in the fight. But we can say Akash was a lion in the fight. So here in the second one, it's not a simile, but it's a metaphor. Then we go to the next one. So we've just had a look at simile and then metaphor. Now we go on to personification. Now what is personification? Well, personification, inanimate objects, that means objects that do not have life, an abstract notion. Now a notion is an idea. It's an idea. So inanimate things which do not have life or abstract notions are spoken of as though they have life and intelligence. Then personification occurs when the author or the speaker gives human characteristics to non-human objects. So when you're talking of things, like suppose you say the sun scowled, or beauty, beauty, like walks, or you, like, say things that do not have life as though they possess life, then it is called, that means you're giving human qualities to things that do not have life. For example, the trees scream in the raging wind. Now, trees make a sound, but it's not screaming. Who screams? A human being screams. A child screams. So, here when you're talking of trees screaming in the raging wind, it is the figure of speech personification. So, can trees actually scream? No, that is a human trait. So, the use of personification gives a better description of the sound that the trees make in while there are very strong winds. The next figure of speech is apostrophe. No, so an apostrophe is a direct address to the dead, to the absent, or to a personified object or an idea. And this figure is a special form of personification. So apostrophe is a direct address to the dead. That means somebody who is not present there. Oh, stars and clouds and winds, ye are all about to mock me. If ye really pity me, crush sensation and memory. Let me become as naught. But if not, depart, depart, and leave me in darkness. So this is taken from Mary Shelley's book Frankenstein, written in 1818. So here she is talking to the stars and the clouds and winds and saying that they are about to mock her. But she's saying that if you really pity me, crush sensation, memory, and let me become naught is zero. Let me become nothing. But if you are not going to have pity, then leave me, depart, depart, and leave me in darkness. That means leave me all alone. Then the next example of personification is when, oh lovely orange, you golden treat, oh tell me, why aren't you easy to eat? So over here, when we see, like, somebody talking to the orange and saying, oh lovely orange, you're such a golden treat, but asking it a question that there is no need of answering. Oh tell me, why aren't you easy to eat? That means they are asking the question why it isn't easy to eat. Now all of us know that it is the peel of it is very bitter and it cannot be eaten. So you have to only eat the inside of it. The next figure of speech that we are going to look at is a hyperbole. In a hyperbole is an exaggeration. It's a statement that is made emphatic. That means you're stressing that statement by overstating it. You're making it emphatic. You're emphasizing it by overstating it. Suppose you tell somebody asks you a question a few times and then you say, oh, I've told you that 1,000,000 times. I've told you that thousands of times. Now, no one ever tells anyone anything 1,000,000 times, right? But for the sake of emphasis, you say that. So, hyperbole is without a doubt the single greatest thing in the history of the universe. Now, so here they are saying that hyperbole is the single greatest thing. It is not. It is just one figure of speech. I will literally die if you don't stop using hyperboles incorrectly. So, no one would die if they heard a wrong hyperbole, right? But here again it is an exaggeration. Suppose you say, oh, it took me 100 days to reach Mumbai or to reach Ahmedabad. It took me 100 hours. Now that is an exaggeration. Maybe you've had a delay. Maybe the train was late, the bus was late. But when you want to stress how long the delay was, you exaggerate and use a hyperbole. Then the next figure of speech that we are going to learn about is euphemism. Euphemism consists in the description of a disagreeable thing by an agreeable name. Now, suppose somebody is telling you lies or somebody is hiding things from you. So what do you tell them? Oh, you're telling me a fairy tale. Now that's not a fairy tale. It is something which is untrue or somebody is telling you some lies. So another example, good news dear, I'm going to be spending more time with the family. Now when somebody says that he is going to be spending more time with the family, what is he saying? Instead of telling the truth and saying that he is fired from his job and now he will not be going to work, he is putting it in very like, in a very nice manner, saying, oh, I'm going to be spending more time with the family now. And the next one, the definition makes something bad sound great. The old man passed away. Now, passed away means he is no longer alive. He is dead. The next figure of speech is antithesis. Now, antithesis is a striking opposition or a contrast of words or sentiments, and it is made in the same sentence. Like in one particular sentence in the poem, we have opposites, and that's called antithesis. It's employed. That means, why is it used? It is used in order to emphasize, to lay stress on something, to emphasize something. Speech is silver, but silence is golden. So, speech and silence are opposites, and silver and gold are also opposites. Now, another example is love and hate, good and evil, peace and war. Now, if these exist, if these appear in one line in the poem, then that is an example of antithesis. Then now we go to the next one. Oxymoron is a special form of antithesis whereby two contrary qualities are predicted at once of the same thing. I am busy doing nothing. Now, how is that possible? So when you have such ludicrous expressions, you have such funny expressions, then you must remember that is oxymoron. A moron is an idiot. But here, you have idiotic examples. Okay, so known secret. Now, if something is a secret, it's a secret. How can it be known? So when you have two words like this being put together, then you call it an oxymoron. Orderly confusion. Now, if there is confusion, there is no order. The absence of order is confusion. So when you put two words like this together, it's when you say orderly confusion, there can never be orderly confusion. Then deafening silence. Now, silence means that you have nothing, but deafening means there is such a lot of noise that you're saying that there is silence. But what kind of silence? You're saying silence that makes you go deaf. It's not possible. Deafening means something that is so loud that it makes you go deaf. Then confirmed rumor. Now, a rumor means something that is untrue. So how can you confirm it? The next one is awfully nice. Now, awful means horrible. Something that isn't very good. Now, when you say nice and awful, that means they are special forms of antithesis. The next one here, as you can see, denoted in the picture, is pretty ugly. That means quite ugly. But here, pretty and ugly are two opposites. If somebody is ugly, is not pretty, and if somebody is pretty, then they are not ugly. But here you have both the things put together. Pretty ugly. The next figure of speech is epigram. Now, an epigram is a brief pointed saying frequently introducing antithetical ideas. Antithesis again means opposite ideas, which excite, surprise, and they arrest attention. That means they capture someone's attention. Now, an example of that is keep calm and write an epigram. Now, if you're writing an epigram, the point of writing an epigram is to excite, to surprise. Okay, so you cannot keep calm while writing an epigram. Then, mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. So this was a quote by John F. Kennedy, the President of United States of America, who was shot. So here, when you say such two different ideas together, mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. So it's either this or that, but both are opposites. Then live simply so that others may simply live. This was said by Mother Teresa. Why? So that she means to say that the rich people live such luxurious life. So she her advice to people, such rich people would be live in a very simple manner so that the others are able to live. The next one, irony is a mode of speech in which the real meaning is exactly the opposite of that what is spoken, of that what is literally conveyed. What you literally conveys means you're saying something, but what you actually mean is not what you say. Now suppose you say, for example, now this is from Macbeth. It is written by William Shakespeare. For Brutus is an honorable man, so are they all honorable men. Now here they do not mean anything like this at all. What they really mean that all these people are traitors. They have betrayed their friend. Okay, they have killed Caesar. Brutus was Caesar's friend, and yet Brutus was the one to kill him. So when they say, so Brutus is an honorable man, he is nothing, he is not at all honorable, and so are they all. They mean to say that none of them are honorable. They are all cheats, they are all traitors, because all of them have plotted to kill Caesar. This quote is spoken by Mark Antony. He is reporting that Brutus is a tyrant. He is an honorable man, but he doesn't mean that. However, Mark Antony does not agree and is saying that if Brutus is an honorable man, then everyone is honorable. In effect, he is no different than anyone else. In fact, he is even worse. Now, when we talk of pun, now a pun on the word means the word that has two meanings. Okay, so it means that means tongue in cheek. When you use a pun, that means it is normally used to give a very humorous effect. So a pun is the use of a word in such a way that it's capable of more than one application or meaning. The object being, why are you using it? In order to produce a very humorous or a very ludicrous effect. Now, is life worth living? You're asking the question. It depends upon the liver. Now, liver means that organ of your body, and it also means the person who's living his life. So when you say, is life worth living? What are you asking? You're asking the question, but you're giving the answer in a pun. And you're saying it depends upon the liver. That means the organ inside your body must be good. Otherwise, your life will be miserable. And it also depends upon the person. Depends upon the person who's living his life. If he lives it well, then life is worth living. The next figure of speech is metonymy. Now, metonymy literally means a change of name. Okay, an object is designated. That means it's spoken of to be the name of something else, which is generally associated to it. For example, if you say sneakers, then you're talking of sports people. If you're talking about the crown, then you know that stands for the king. So when you're talking of cradle, you mean a baby. So when you normally talking of things that are closely related to the people. Here, now when you're talking of synecdoche, in synecdoche, a part is part for a whole or whole for a part. A part is used to designate the whole. For example, parts of the body, and whole to designate a part. Now when we say give us, this is a prayer. So when we say, like, this is the prayer Our Father. When we talk and pray to God and say, give us this day our daily bread. Now you don't want bread to eat every day, right? So what are you asking God for? You're asking for all your basic needs. You're asking for all your necessities. Allah. So when you're asking for daily bread, you're asking for your daily requirements from God. And when you say England won the first test match against Australia, now the two countries are not playing, but they are the sports people, the cricket team. So when you say England, you mean the English cricket team. And when you mean Australia, so both the countries are not pitched against each other, but it is the cricket team that is playing. So when you say England won the first test match against Australia, it means the English cricket team won the first match. So here although they're using the country, but they mean the whole is used for the part. The next figure of speech that we are going to learn about is transferred epithet. In this figure of speech, an epithet, that is a word or a phrase that describes a person or a thing, is transferred from its proper word to another that is closely associated with it in the sentence. Now when you're saying dreamless sleep. Now sleep means you could have dreams or no dreams, but here an epithet is transferred from the proper word to that which is closely related to it. Like strong, the epithets, a plump, rosy-cheeked, wholesome, apple-faced young woman. So all these, all these adjectives are used for that woman. Sleepless pillow, merry hours, then unbreakfasted morning, then drunken dark. Then in this, lighter teas, or you could call it litter teas. Lighter teas is an affirmative that is conveyed by a negation of the opposite, the effect being to suggest a strong expression by means of a weaker. It is the opposite of a hyperbole. Now when you say the man is not this man, or the man is no fool, that means you mean to say that he is very clever. Now there isn't anything I won't eat when I am hungry. So what he means to say, he will eat anything when he is hungry. In fact, they say hunger is the best sauce. That means when you're hungry, you don't need any additional things to be given to you. Whatever is given, you will eat. So here it's the same thing. There isn't anything I won't eat when I'm hungry. That means when I'm hungry, you give me anything and I'll have it. And that is the translation. I'll eat anything when I'm hungry. The next figure of speech is interrogation. Now interrogation is the rhetorical question. That means you're asking a question just for the sake of asking it. You don't expect an answer and no one expects you to give an answer. Interrogation is the asking of a question not for the sake of getting an answer, but just to pose that question. Are you crazy? That means we know that you're not crazy. Can you imagine that? That means you cannot imagine it. If you poison us, do we not die? That means if you poison someone, they will surely die. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? That means what you have done is truly shameful. Then, when we talk of anastrophe, now, persuade you I shall. So, anastrophe means the scheme. When you rearrange the parts of a sentence or phrase and change the order, accepted order. Now, when poets write poems, they have what is known as poetic license. So they can change the order of the words. But you as students do not have poetic license. So you're not to apply this while writing your answers. Okay, this is just for you to understand. That means instead of saying I shall persuade you, here the person is saying persuade you I shall. So that's an anastrophe. Then we come to the figure of speech exclamation. In this figure of speech, the exclamatory form is used to draw greater attention to a point than a mere bald or plain statement of it could do. That means instead of saying it in very plain terms, you're using an exclamation. How sweet the moonlight on upon this bank. That means how sweet that moonlight is. How nice it looks. How beautiful the scenery is upon the river bank. The next one is climax. I told you at the beginning that climax is the arrangement of a series of ideas in the order of increasing importance. That means the first idea is the least important, then it gains some importance, and then after that the idea has the greatest importance. There are three things that will endure: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Now this is a quotation taken from the Bible. So here they are telling us that three things will endure. Faith is the basis, then it goes on to hope, and then to love. Then anticlimax is the opposite of climax. A sudden descent from the higher to the lower, and it's used for the purpose of satire or ridicule. That means when you're trying to make fun of something or someone, you're trying to point out the weaknesses of something. He lost his family, his car, and his cell phone. Now, losing one's family is something, it's an irreparable loss. Then, if you lose your car, you can buy another car. If you lose a cell phone, which is still smaller. So, what is the most important thing? Losing one's family, and then the car, and then the cell phone. So, this is from the highest order it comes down to a very menial or trivial thing. Then the next one is onomatopoeia. Now onomatopoeia is like a figure of speech that you can never forget. It is very simple and it's very easy for you to pick it out. It's the formation of a word from the sound that is associated with what is named. For example, the word cuckoo. Cuckoo is a bird and it is also the sound. The cuckoo makes a cuckooing sound. It's a cuckoo. And sizzle, like you have water. If you have a hot plate and you sprinkle water on it, then you will hear the sizzling sound. That's why you have sizzlers being served in a hotel. So they are actually sizzling. They are so hot. So here we come to the end of this lesson, figures of speech. We have looked at all the important figures of speech from the point of view of your exam. So make sure you go through each one of them, write down, make notes, and then try and understand what is the meaning, what is the purpose of that particular figure of speech being used, and then take one poem and then read through it and try to understand what the poet is trying to say, where they're using repetition, where they're using similes, what are the things being compared, where there's a transferred epithet, where synecdoche or alliteration or all these different figures of speech are used. So thank you children and have a nice day.